In the drier months of the year, it can be really easy to avoid washing your bike. But really, you want to avoid that if possible, because that's when the creaks and groans happen. And before you know it, your bike's going to end up sounding like an old wheezing donkey. But fear not, you don't need to get the jet wash out. This is when the dry clean comes in. Okay, so first up, what exactly is a dry clean? Well, as the name might suggest, you're not going to be using a bucket, a brush, water, a hose pipe, a jet wash, traditional Muc-Off or wet cleaning products, anything like that. This is a dry based clean, which means you can do this indoors and you can do this anytime. The idea is it's very fast to do and it's top up maintenance. Think of it as like an interval service. So you're basically giving your drivetrain a once over to make sure there's no grit that's worked its way in. You're making sure there's no grit and dust that's working its way into chain rings and pivots that's going to cause creaks later on. And you're ensuring that your suspension is going to remain nice and smooth. It's a really fast way of cleaning your bike, and it's something I actually do quite often, especially in the last few months of lockdown, where my canyon has been getting super dusty on the local trails. So I've actually resorted to doing this most days, and basically it's a quick top up. So that's all you need to really know about it. As you can see, I've got Neil's Polo behind me here. I'm using this because it's got the perfect amount of dust on it. The sort of dusty bike that's quite easy to just put a lube on the chain and leave it for the next ride. You don't want to be doing that though, so I'm going to walk you through this. As you can see, the dust kind of collects like on the underside of the tube where it comes off the front wheel, around the fork seals. You can see there's a load here around this lower pivot here, and it's a little bit moist, so that suggests that it's either been worked on in the past or the dust is basically just sticking to where there's lubricant on the frame. So that's where it's going to work its way in, so that's what we want to prevent. So what are you going to need to do this? Well, you can need a few tools, obviously some Allen keys, anything just to work on your bike as per usual, but you're not going to need any particular special kit except for just a few cleaning products. Now, first up, I really recommend using a proper microfiber cloth over a generic rag or an old t-shirt or something. And the reason for that is, in the summer, it's a fine grit sort of stuff, and you can end up smearing it around and basically scratching your paintwork. Microfiber cloths are designed to pull the moisture and pull stuff away from whatever you're working on, and they just work a lot better. So get yourself a microfiber cloth, but don't be tempted to use this to clean your drivetrain. We've used this for most of the cleaning work and then wash it afterwards. For the drivetrain, I do recommend just using an old rag, because it doesn't matter what happens to those. Now, you'll need some cleaning based products. Now, something I've actually discovered literally the last few months is this waterless wash. It's blown my mind away, because not only can you get a really good clean on the bike, like good enough to pass off as a full clean, but actually slightly polishes the bike as well, which means it not only helps stuff stop sticking to it, but makes it easier to clean next time. It's a really cool product. But you don't have to use this. There's other products you probably already have at home that you can use in the short term. Now, bike spray is one of my favourites. It's a corrosion inhibitor that I always use on my transmission after I've washed the bike, but it's also quite good for getting stuff off the bike itself. I wouldn't recommend spraying it on the bike, just spray some on your microfiber cloth though, and then you can use it to pull some of the stuff off the frame. If you're going to go down this route, then you might also want to use some polish. Silicone shine's good for this. You can also use it on your suspension surfaces afterwards to make sure stuff doesn't stick to those too. Next up, you're going to need something to clean your transmission. Now, there's various options here depending on how dirty your transmission is and what sort of lube you've been using. As you can see on Neil's one here, in fact, it actually looks like a brand new transmission. I've got a feeling he fitted a new one for a video fairly recently, but I can see some sort of loamy type mud in there, so that does suggest that he's been using some sort of lube and it's stuck on there, so you want to get that out. Two ways of doing this really. You can use a traditional style chain cleaner, which is wet. If you want the fast option of cleaning this though, you can spray it directly onto a rag and use it to take the worst off, provided that that grit's not worked its way into the chain, but we'll get to that a bit later. The other option is actually something from the e-bike range of products by Muc-Off. So it's not necessarily something that we'd normally talk about with regular bikes, but actually I found this to be really good when I've been cleaning the e-bike. Now, something that's not discussed on e-bikes that much is the fact how much more gunk builds up on your transmission. And there's two reasons for this. One of them is because you tend to over oil your transmission because of the fact you're just topping up the whole time because you just want to get out cranking on the thing. And the other one is because it's generally harder to clean your transmission on an e-bike because of the fact that the motor and the drivetrain disengages. So if you pedal backwards like you would on this bike, the chain stays still on an e-bike, so it makes it that bit harder to clean. So there's a product called Dry Chain Cleaner, and it evaporates afterwards. It literally takes all of the stuff off the chain so you can start fresh. It's a brilliant product, and I'm actually going to try using a bit of this today on Neil's chain. Now, of course, you're going to need your favourite chain lube. Mine generally is a dry lube. Unless it's absolutely lashing it down with rain outside, I'll always use a dry lube. I would prefer to have to use it more often than use and make it easier for myself to clean the drivetrain than use a wet lube. But hey, it's up to you. There's lots of different choices and they're all going to suit different people. Finally, you're going to want some kind of suspension lube or suspension safe lube. You can use the basic sprays around stuff, but I actually prefer to use a dedicated lube. Of course, there's lots of different options available. You might find that if you bought some aftermarket suspension forks from Fox or RockShox, that actually came with some lube. There's different ones available on the market. The one I've got here is actually the prototype lube. I've actually been doing a bit of testing from Muc-Off with. I can't tell you what's in it because I don't know, but it works really well. So it might be available at some point, or it might have just been a sample I've been lucky enough to get. Either way, get yourself some sort of suspension lube. And the last one I want to talk about actually is just some antibacterial cleaner. I've often referred to this before with putting it on the inside of your helmets, basically when your helmet pads are soaking wet, and the same with your riding shoes when they've been saturated with sweat from riding, because it kills the bacteria, which means they're less likely to build up any smell. But also in the whole COVID lockdown era, I've actually been spraying my saddle, my grips and stuff like that on the bike during these interim services, just to make sure that, you know, if there's any traces of anything, I know it's actually taken care of. It's an easy way around stuff. Okay, so let's get started. Now, with any sort of bike cleaning, you want to have a kind of method to it, otherwise it's easy to forget things and also mess things up. Now, if this was a traditional wet clean, i.e. outside with a hose or whatever, I would suggest starting from the top down. That way, any water dripping down the bike is going to be clean water rather than soiled water. But seeing as this is just dust and it's in a work stand, we're going to work front to back. That way, I'm not going to forget anything. Now I'm going to start by looking at the front wheel. Now in Neil's case, he's got a set of Mavic D-Max wheels and they're famous for having flat bladed spokes, so they attract a lot of dust, and at a glance it makes the bike look a lot dirtier than it is. So we'll give them a quick wipe down, also giving the rims and the sidewalls of the tyres a wipe down too. Now pay attention to the sidewalls on your tyres for two reasons. Check them for any nicks and any damage you might see that could later lead to a puncture, and also see if there's any wet patches that dust has stuck to. If there is, and it's more likely, if at all, to be on the rear wheel, unless you're a real shredder, there's a chance that you could have burped your tyre, in which case you've lost a bit of sealant and the dust has stuck to it. Now, depending how much you've lost, or depending how when you last topped up that sealant, you might want to consider adding some extra sealant at this point. Now obviously, just use this as an opportunity to inspect the tyre and inspect the wheel. In this case, it's a brand new set of tyres, so they're absolutely fine. But obviously you're going to be riding a lot in drier conditions, and quite often if you have a nick in the tyre, you don't really pay attention to it until it's too late. So this is your golden opportunity in between rides to make sure your bike is ready to shred for the next time. Okay, so I'm going to remove the front wheel of the bike here just to give me better access to the fork and all its sort of intricate parts around the archway and the back of the seals, etc. You might also want to repeat this with the rear wheel, especially if you've got a complex suspension frame like this Polo here. It's got lots of intricate parts of CNC machining and stuff where it can be quite difficult to get access to. So removing the wheel gives you basically put your hand all around the back of stuff, and all those little cavities that can harbour dust means you can get them really clean, make it look brand new, and that's the idea of this. Okay, so back to the fork. I don't like to use a cleaner just yet. I always try to give things a bit of a dry clean first before I go in with the actual cleaner. It's a bit more sparing, and I do the same with the frame as well. So quick wipe down, paying particular attention to the stanchion tubes, that is the upper tubes of your suspension fork, and around the suspension seals there. You want to inspect them for damage and make sure you're not brushing around any debris that could scratch those stanchion tubes. That is key. You do not want to scratch them. Now, we did make a video ages ago on how to sort of repair a scratch. It's a very temporary measure, it's not a permanent fix. There's going to be a link to that in the description underneath this video if you want to check that one out as well. It also works on dropper posts because essentially it's still a suspension stanchion. It works in exactly the same way, has to pass a bushing, has to pass a seal, so the same things apply there. Now note how much dust there is around the seals and around the back of the fork arch there. Now note that that area is prone to attracting dust and muck and all sorts of other stuff in there. Now typically we tend to run mud guards in the UK, but in the summer it's quite nice to take them off. The bikes do look a bit better, I think, without them. I guess Neil thinks the same because he's not got one on here. but that area is prone, like I said a minute ago, for attracting stuff, and it's a pain in the arse basically to clean. So a little cool hack that I've been doing, I've seen a lot of pro mechanics do this as well, is get some heli tape once this is clean and basically just cover up the back of there. Alternatively, if you want to do something that looks a bit cooler, you can sticker bomb it and basically cover up the whole back of that archway there with stickers. And it looks really cool. And if you've got any, like if you have a set of RockShox forks, for example, they might have come with a little RockShox sticker in the manual with the pump and stuff. So you can cut them up basically and sticker bomb it. Okay, so the last thing you want to do to the suspension forks, we're actually going to do when we finish the bike, because it involves using lube. And I don't want to put lube on it yet when I'm still cleaning dust off. Do any lubing last, do your cleaning first. Okay, and now onto the main frame of the bike. I like to repeat the same process pretty much as I did with the forks. I give it a wipe down with that microfiber cloth first, just to get the worst of the dust away. And then I get to work with the waterless wash. This is where this stuff really comes in, and as you can see, it really does a great job of making a bike look exceptionally clean. I don't know why I didn't see this stuff before, to be honest. Now, pay particular attention to around all the suspension areas, because of course they work on bearings and bushings depending on what bike you have, and it's quite likely that you will have some lube or some grease or some form of stuff will have seeped out, which attracts dust. You want to make sure that is all cleaned away, because dust, of course, with moving parts, whether it's rotating or whatever's going on down there, they can ingest that dust and grit. The same applies to the back of the cranks there. Any moving parts, any sort of dust that's overly attracted to that area, sooner or later it will work its way in. And whether it prematurely wears those bearings or bushings down, it will lead to some sort of creaks in time, and that will drive you mad. And if it doesn't, then you're an amazing person, because it drives me absolutely bonkers when that happens. It's always a when, it's not an if as well. So make sure you do that as best as you can and work your way around. Now, when you get to the chain stays and the seat stay of the drive side, or your transmission side, you might find that there's little spots here, as you can see on Neil's chainstay, where the dust is stuck to lube that's probably come off the chain after he's lubed it, and the same on the inside of the seat stays there. No matter what sort of chain guide or chain protection you're running, the chain at some point is going to be brushing up against here, and you'll find that naturally there'll be more dust and gunk and stuff built up. Instead of using the waterless wash, you might just want to use the chain cleaner on this part of the bike here first, just to take that stuff off. Avoid spraying it onto the actual bike, spray it onto the rag first, not the microfiber cloth, save that for this bit. Just use that with the waterless wash only, and use the rag with the transmission based stuff. If you're spraying it and the mist goes anywhere near disc brakes, well, it's either a real quick trip to a dentist or you ruin your brake pads, whichever comes first, unfortunately. So just make sure you don't get any sort of oil or lubricant or polish anywhere near your braking surfaces. That's a general rule of thumb for cycling. Okay, now it's time to get your transmission and drivetrain clean. Now, this is the key to making sure your bike really does work in between washes. Now, looking at Neil's one here, I'm pretty aware that he's got a new transmission on it anyway, so it looks super clean, but looks can be deceiving. If you look up close, you'll see that it's got loads of little, it looks like quite loamy sort of soil on the chain and cassette there, and on those guide wheels of the derailleur. Now, that's the sort of stuff that really wears things down, so I want to make sure that it cleans out. A telltale sign though to know how bad it is just by turning the pedals around slightly. Listen to this. Or in fact, there's nothing to listen to. That's a good sound. If your sound's grindy, crunchy almost, then you're going to need to do a proper clean on it. And that involves using a dedicated chain, like drive chain cleaner, degreaser, chain cleaner, something like that. But in this case, I've got 3 options here. So if you don't have any chain cleaning products, any specific ones, what I can get away with in this case is spraying some bike spray. That's the corrosion inhibitor. It's actually got some lube in there, but it's not a lubricant for chains as such. If you spray some of that on a rag, basically pass the chain through it, that will lift off a lot of that dirt and grub that's on there. So actually it works quite well. The next option would be to use a dedicated chain cleaner. Now, this is a wet cleaner and it's really powerful stuff. Now, I wouldn't necessarily want to do it on a dry clean, so I would use the same thing again, spray it directly onto a rag and pass the chain through it. Now, one thing to note with dedicated chain cleaner is powerful stuff, and it basically dissolves greases and lubricants. That's what it's designed to do, to take the stuff off the chain. So if there's any of this still left on your chain when you go to lubricate your chain later, it can start dissolving that as well. So make sure you get it all off before you move on to lubing your bike. Now, another product that isn't necessarily for regular bikes, this is actually designed around e-bikes, is a dry chain cleaner. Now, this one's actually quite surprised me. Now, if you think on a regular bike like this one, if you turn the cranks backwards, your chain spins backwards. Therefore, it makes it super easy for lubing your chain and cleaning your chain, because you can literally just run the chain through your hand, obviously holding a rag. On an e-bike, because the motor has to disconnect from the drivetrain, you don't get that luxury, which means doing the same process is a lot harder. So Muc-Off basically developed this. It's a dry chain cleaner, so it evaporates. It's not a wet cleaner as such, like the bio cleaner. It means you can basically douse the entire transmission with the stuff, and it basically eats away all the grease and the muck on it, and it means it's a lot easier to do it. So for mass market appeal, that is fantastic for e-bikes, but actually it's a bit of a secret weapon to have for your dry cleans for your normal bike. It's good stuff. I'm just going to go one step further though on Neil's bike, because it's bare alloy, CNC machined aluminium. There's lots of little pockets here, and one of the effects of having bare alloy is it gets watermarks on it, just like some pots and pans you might have in your kitchen at home. So I'm going to use some metal polish just around some of those areas that harbour the water. You tend to get those watermarks that are a bit harder to keep off, and hopefully it'll bring it up super shiny. Now, the two last things to do on the bike are take care of your dropper seat post if you have one, and your suspension fork seals, which we started work on at the beginning of the video. Now, we'll do the dropper post first because it's in plain sight. Now, think of this as a suspension fork. It works exactly the same way. You've got a seal here and you've got a stanchion tube that slides in amongst that. Now, the bare minimum you should do here is clean that seal and make sure that stanchion tube is nice and clean. You can cycle it through by engaging the lever a few times just to make sure it's smooth. Now, once it's clean, notice if there's any muck that's drawn from inside that tube. Bear in mind, it's a telescopic nature, so it's going to ingest muck in there. Now, if you put some suspension lube on that stanchion surface and then cycle it up and down a few times, you might find it pulls out some dust and grit from on the inside there. That's a good sign, it's getting rid of it. So if it does that, apply a bit more, do it a few more times basically until it's nice and clean, and it will feel a lot better. There's an additional step you can make here. Now, on some dropper seat posts, you can actually unscrew this top collar here that's got the seal on it. And if you slide this up and out of the way, and then you compress your seat post and put it back up, you'll see the bushing actually start sliding up underneath. You've got direct access to that. Now, if you give this a good clean and you put a little dab of suspension grease and suspension lube under here, then close it and repeat the process as we've just done before, you'll find it returns a bit quicker and just feels a lot smoother. At the end of the day, it's about reducing the friction and keeping the muck out of there. So if you can do that, it's going to work brilliantly. You might not need to do this all the time, but again, just make sure it's clean and there's no muck being pulled out onto that stanchion, and it will work great. And now time to just repeat the same process with the seat post on your suspension fork. Put a bit of suspension lube around the seals. When you're doing it on your left side, which is your disc rotor side or the non-drive side of your bike, just be careful you don't drip any oil. It doesn't go anywhere near your brake, which is directly below you. So just something to be cautious of there. Once you've put some oil on those, around those seals there, compress your fork a few times and you'll find it pulls out some dirt and grit and some more other gunk up onto the fork legs. Give it a wipe down, repeat a couple of times as necessary, and then your small bump sensitivity will be fantastic for the next few rides. Well, there you go, that's how you dry clean your bike. It's a pretty simple process. Get in the habit of doing it after every ride and your bike will be creak free for much longer, and it'll thank you for it in the long run. There's a couple of videos just hanging around over there for you, and also in the description underneath are a few more videos that I referenced earlier on. And well, like always, thanks for hanging around. Oh, and if you like our new merch, we've got some real cool adventure stuff, the mugs, the t-shirts and that. They're in the store right now. Get involved quick before they run out.